What's up, y'all? What's up? What's up? It is MB the Life Coach, your absolute favorite mental health and success coach, and you already know why we here. We have yet again another Black business highlight. I am getting ready to tag our guest of the day in today. So definitely make sure y'all saying all that, because we're about to have a good time. Let's see. Hello, beautiful. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. I'm well. Thank you for being our guest for today.
Thank you for the invitation.
You are so very welcome. So, I'm going to send this invite out to a few people. While we send our invites out, we do want to give you the floor so you can introduce yourself and let our audience know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay, well, my name is Amber Oliver. I'm an educator and equity lead in Maryland. I'm also the CEO and founder of a book subscription box for children, parents, and educators, and it is called Reading Revolutionaries. We ship to 3 countries currently and several states within the United States. And we focus on representation, the nuance of representation, trying to steer away from tokenism and just kind of also educating parents and building more community with educators to normalize anti-bias and anti-racist education in and outside of the classroom. We believe that every child should see themselves in books and brands, and so we offer diverse representation in characters and authors, and we also feature 2 to 3 small marginalized owned businesses in each box. So, and we're quarterly, so we go out every 3 months.
So, what actually brought it out? Let's talk about the birth of all of this. How did this start, and how did it grow?
It started because my son, I have 3 children and my oldest is 10. He falls under the category of a reluctant reader. I always mention that I don't really like the term because it's kind of negative. They're really just children that just kind of are reading at their own pace, and it may not be at the pace that others expect or think that they should be reading at. They're typically children that are still heavily interested in graphic novels versus regular chapter novels.
Yep.
And I wanted to try to get him a little bit more encouraged with book exploration. And I couldn't find anything for, the graphic novel child who kind of may be a little intimidated by chapter novels, but may kind of find something if his interest was kind of triggered a little bit more. So that was one issue. And then I just noticed across the board with a lot of the major companies, there's a lack of consistent diversity rep. It kind of seems to be congruent with whatever's happening in society and in the news, and I didn't really like that. So I said, well, let me just create something that one could center children or also be inclusive to children that may not fall under the expectation of reading levels or who may have that little hesitance to explore more books, and also extend a more consistent message to children, families and parents who are trying to unlearn and relearn themselves, educators who are trying to enhance their classrooms with diversity and inclusion, and just kind of put something out there so children can see themselves in books, see themselves in brands. There's a large diversity gap across the board, and there's a lot of larger commercial items that actually we have alternatives that are made within our own community, and these brands need to be highlighted as well. So
I
yeah.
percent agree. So, you said a mouthful of things that I can
Yeah.
personally. One, my daughter, she's also a very intellectual child and enjoys dialogue over actually sitting down and reading. And
Mhm.
has something that she's interested in, she can engulf her total focus into it. But right now, she's struggling in the area of reading, and I've noticed that difference. And so the other thing that you mentioned was representation being important. Growing up, there's normally whatever's trending as far as beautiful, and however those things kind of evolve over time, that's what
Yeah.
you start to see, whether it's what you look like or what someone else looks like. And I love that what you all are doing is opening space enough for everyone to have their representation so that they can feel like they have something to relate to, whether it's a character, a story, a series of books, with different I think that that's really, really dope. And so in the summary that you sent us, you know, also shared that there's a cohort of authors, and you kind of have a team that you're working with to kind of push this out. So where can we expect to see your company in the next 3 to 5 years?
In the next 3 to 5 years, not only would I like to expand the subscription box, we're building more relationship with schools, mainly on the elementary school level, because that is where I teach. So we're trying to build more relationship with schools and try to integrate our box with a lot of equity PD trainings and kind of see where that flows. My ultimate goal for Reading Revolutionaries is I would like to have a bookstore that is completely catering to children. So think of like your Barnes and Nobles, but consistent, diverse, just for children. So the authors will still come and do their book tours, the book signings. Children center book clubs can come meet there, and they can just come relax, check out books, buy books, whatever. It's their space. And so that's what I'd like to do, and see if that can kind of grow and become like a franchise or something like that.
Oh, it definitely will, because that's what you're doing,
Yeah.
especially education system.
Yeah.
Self, being a younger Black woman, didn't always have representation in the books that we read and the stories that we read, and
Right.
mostly the history that was being taught. So growing up, I always had a subconscious issue with trying to figure out where I fit. And I kind of want to talk about the importance of having representation, especially at that younger stage in children, and also with the implementation of what you're doing with your books, why having that representation is important, especially as it pertains to children understanding where they fit in the world.
Well, first, the child begins reading by just looking at images. Images are the first form of communication or just kind of interpretation they experience. And if we look at brain development, a lot of parents and adults in general tend to believe this myth that children don't see color when they do. We all do. That's the first thing we see when we actually see somebody. But, by 3 months old, a child recognizes color differences. By age 3, they recognize racial differences in the world around them. And by age 12, whatever has been taught to them, either directly or indirectly, they then internalize, and it becomes foundational to their core beliefs. So it is very critical for children to normalize the diversity that's what the human body is. We are not all the same. No community is a monolith, and that needs to be normalized. So when you're seeing people around this, a lot of people um, tend to lack their inner community, seems to just kind of bland. I hate to use that word, but it is what it is, where a lot of people can't even understand or grasp the concept of empathy, because I can also bring into critical race theory. We're seeing a lot of white fragility happening across the board in the country because a lot of people don't want to put names to things that will really, cease trauma in a lot of marginalized communities. And that's critical. And if we can't normalize even having empathy for someone, it can start with just books. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn out conversation. A lot of people are like, well, I don't know where I can start. My child is only 3, they're only 4, they're too young. It can start with them just seeing Black and brown people, the large spectrum of people as a collective that we are, in art, in books, on the options of TV, whatever screen time you get for your child. There's ways to normalize it. So then when you have to have the harder conversations, it isn't like a largest thing. And there's a way that you can kind of navigate that conversation. So the guilt is really empathy for another group. And so then you kind of teach them to critically think, analyze the resources that they're getting, analyze even the education that they're getting in school. We should teach children to think for themselves and to analyze all perspectives, not just kind of accept the one, linear view that is also just kind of spoon fed to us. So that's just kind of in a nutshell.
Well, I 1,000% for multiple reasons. One of which, my high school mentor, who is also now my soror, but the reason why I even went to college in the first place, let alone attended an HBCU, she engraved in our brain, I'm not here to teach you what to think. I'm here to teach you how to think. And
Yes.
when you go through, the longer it takes for you to realize I can't wait for someone to tell me what to think. I have to figure out how to think on my own. The harder it's gonna be for that thought process to become more natural.
Yeah.
Another it was understanding those differences. And you talked about the development. One of the things that I believe in is backed by psychology as well as science is that the first 5 to 7 years of your life is literally you learning your norms, understanding your culture, knowing where you come from, understanding the rules of engagement, and then you start to live life based off of that foundation that's set within that first 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
The 7 years, so from the age of 7 to 14, you spend that time figuring out what your friend group is going to look like and what your personal identity looks like around those norms and that foundation that was set.
Yeah.
That 14 14 to 18, you spend that time literally just evolving into whatever adult you're going to look like. What a lot of people forget to realize is most people say, oh, at 18 you grown, go figure it out. At 18, I have been a professional child for the last 18 years. And now you're telling me to go from being a child to being an adult, which I've never been before. And if what we said is true, with that first 5 to 7 years of development being the most important for a child, that first 5 to 7 years of adulthood is the most important for an adult, because you're going to spend the rest of your life being an adult, not just the first 18 years of your life. So going back to the importance of books and representation, when you have that early and you start to teach exactly what you said, empathy, it also opens the door and segue people to be able to understand and start to talk about their feelings.
Yeah.
And that's often lacked. We
Yeah.
don't discuss our feelings, let alone separate the difference in similar feelings. Most children, if you ask them, are you mad, angry, upset, frustrated, they can't decipher the difference. They take it all as, I'm angry, I'm mad.
Yeah.
It's just that. When if you take your time to go over that, hey, why are you frustrated? Why are you upset? It goes back to the representation and that empathy that you can have. And in these books, having those conversations, hey, someone took their toy and it made them feel sad. Well, why did that make them feel sad? This was a toy that their dad gave them and their dad went away for some time. Whether it was, military related or, they passed away, whatever. But when you build books around those realistic situations for children, it opens the doors for them to easily have those conversations, not just amongst their peers, but also with adults. And it allows them to be able to separate how they feel to communicate more effectively. And great communicators as children become great communicators as adults. Someone in the audience said, I spoke with our first Black female mayor and asked her the same thing. Great topic. And then the last thing that I'll add to this, which will segue me into my next question for you. Today, me and my daughter were going to get a car wash, and she saw a police officer, and she looked at me and said, Mommy, I'm scared. And I said, why are you scared? She said, because he has a gun. And I asked her, what makes her afraid of him having his uniform on and having a gun? And she said, because when the trigger goes off, it's loud and guns kill people. So I said, well, if you have questions, how about you ask him, and ask him those questions and you communicate to him that you're scared. And she told me she didn't want to say it. So I asked her if she wanted me to initiate the conversation. And I did. And I said, excuse me. I said, my daughter has a couple questions, but when you walked in, she told me she was scared. And he asked her, well, why are you scared? And they had those conversations. And he asked if she wanted to see the police car when it came out of, from getting.
Yeah.
And he showed her everything. And, she got to ask some conversations. And it took away that fear of being scared of something that she doesn't understand.
Yeah.
So that's my long-winded way to get your opinion on building books and topics around teaching children how to understand things that they may naturally fear because it's not normal for them.
I think it's important because there's also a sense of pride of seeing yourself in your community and in the environment that you live in, the world around you. It builds a sense of self, like self-respect and self-esteem. When you're absent, I kind of think of history this way. A lot of people think history is boring or don't like history, and I often think it's tied to the erasure of so many people in the history that we receive. So if you're never seeing yourself, why would you take interest is something that you are taught that you really had little contribution toward. So, you know, it's important to cover all aspects. You know, representation, it's with all intersections of identity, like disability, neurodivergence. It's everything. Gender, the gender binary construct, everything. It involves everything. You can even talk about different social justice movements from a small age. This is how you teach children to not only critically think, but then with the empathy piece also comes, okay, actionable steps. So now I'm kind of understanding this movement. I'm understanding, you know, this community. I'm understanding what they're trying to fight for. I'm understanding a little bit more about their existence and what, you know, what they need from the human collective. Now, what can I do? How can I give of myself as a true ally, as a true co-conspirator? Because, you know, anyone could be an ally. I'll just put that out there. You know, you can do the hashtag BLM all day. You can say you're an ally. You can read the books, but then what are you doing after you read the books? You know, it's more than the book stacks. It's more than tagging all the people. It's like, what are you doing outside of these pages that is trying to, you know, show that you're willing to stand for something that not only affects, you know, or increases what is needed in marginalized communities, but when these communities get what is due to them, it really affects the better of the entire community in general, just the human body. So it's very important. It's important to talk about, you know, this is also tied into the book banning. A lot of these books are being banned because of these sensitive topics, but a lot of the children, you know, I sit in meetings with teachers all the time and I'm like, you know, these children, they come to school at 9 o'clock and they've already dealt with so many things by the time they get to the door. So, you know, that you can't act like they come to school and they're like kind of oblivious to the world around them when that's the world they're coming to us from. So, you know, you need to talk about, you know, the children that may have parents in the prison system. You need to talk about racism because, you know, we have Black and brown children who are dealing with this on the outside. A lot of children's first encounters with these types of things are from other children on school property. So, you know, you need to normalize these things. It's how you talk about. You can integrate this in your literary like circle times, your community circles. That's what I do with my first graders. There's ways to talk about it just so they can kind of see things from someone else's perspective, and then also see how they can maybe change the future. How can I prevent this from happening, or how can I at least remove myself from, you know, kind of also enacting these traumas on other people? And there's ways to use language so that you're not talking about traumas if that's a trigger word for you with a 3-year-old. There's ways to use language so they know that, you know, you can see differences, you can see color, and then also respect this person because they're a human being just like you.
I agree. So someone in the audience said too much empathy is poison. Depending on how taught can make a child racist. I personally would love to hear your opinion on that. But for me, I don't feel that too much empathy is poisonous, and depending on how it can be taught can make a child racist. I feel that biased empathy being taught can make a child racist because it teaches those biases, and you're teaching your empathy based off of a closed-minded, premeditated, predestined structure that will shape a child's mind and beliefs in one dimensional. If you tell a child, hey, if you do this, this is bad. If you say this, this is bad. If you talk to this person, this is bad. Those are the things that they're going to grow up believing, and that's going to continue to develop as they grow older. When you teach a child, hey, people are different and it's okay to have conversations with people who are different, you'll find out that a lot of times you have things in common, but you can discuss how you handle them differently, or how, you know, your parents may talk to you differently. Most children experience some level of depression that goes undiagnosed and untalked about in the household, regardless to background, creed, race, ethnicity, any of that. They experience that level of depression. If you take a Black child and a white child and you put them in a room, or even including an Asian child, a Hispanic child, how do it? If you talk to these children and they all share, well, hey, I felt sad and my mommy or my daddy wasn't able to listen to me, and I feel sad because I don't like the way that I look and I think that I'm ugly and I don't get that validation in the house. They can all bond over those similar experiences and talk about the ways that they're handled differently based off of their cultures, their norms, their households, as well as what's common in their communities. And that's the way that you're able to infuse empathy while also differences, but not discluding or over including the way that one dynamic may feel and discrediting the other aspect of that conversation.
And yeah, you said a mouthful, and you said it really well. You articulated that really well. Another piece is, this is how we get away from monocultural. This is why the nuance of identity is so important. And we have these nice terms like BIPOC, and it's great, but it takes away. I'm not just Black, I'm Caribbean. That's a difference. There's Black is a term that is a part of a social construct I'm personally trying to do away with. It may take some time. The layers are deep. But, when you think of Black, a lot of times it defaults to like the American experience. It's expansive. Slavery and oppression is a very short time period compared to how expansive global Black history is. So when we talk about representation, it's also about expanding our perception of whatever Blackness is, who is Black, because it's not, oppression didn't just happen in America. Colonization happened across the globe. Black people have been everywhere. If you are listening and did not know, they've always existed everywhere. So it's important, and you can't have too much empathy. With empathy, you don't just lead a child to this, this pool of empathy and just leave them there. This is where the actionable steps come right after that. Then you talk to this is where the critical thinking comes in. This is how you start to analyze things. This is how you start to look at your relationships and the people around you. This may not happen with children, but a lot of adults, when they do a lot of unpacking, they have to cut some ties. They have to love some people from a distance. You don't have to be racist. And this is why we need to be cultural forward, I feel. There's more to diversity than just racial diversity. There's multicultural diversity, which to me is of utmost importance, because that really, kind of highlights identity in its fullness and doesn't reduce people to, this white and Black construct, when we are so much more than that. Our lineage is so much colorful than that. So, it really depends on the mindset of the parents. And that's why my work doesn't just center on, I could easily say, oh, this book's coming out, let me throw it in the box. No, it's not just about that. I want to get the books to the kids, but I'm also talking to the parents and the adults, because if they don't understand how important this is, they're just going to think that they're anti-racist and anti-biased because they're buying a couple of books. Like, no, it's not just that. No, the work is also working with your child to learn how to cite sources, check sources. There's ways to even use older books from the 80s and 90s. There's a ways to use, there's a lot of books that have tokenism in them where, you think they're diverse because there's the one kid in the wheelchair, or there's one child that looks like they may not be able to see. There's the one Black kid. That's not really diverse. Not all good representation. All not representation is good representation. And that's part of the conversation as well. So it's not just going out to buy a book based off of what the illustration looks like. And you can buy them and make a lesson out of it. This is what's problematic, and this is how it removes the identity acknowledgement of this group of people. So there's many ways to do the lesson, and it doesn't have to be, a black or white thing. There's a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of layers. It's something that this is life work. It's not something that anyone does over any period of time, because you can be an ally to every community. It's not just about being an ally to the Black community. There are other marginalized groups that also need, people to surround them. And when we come together as a collective, we change things. And that's why there's so much division and all these isms, because they know what happens when the collective comes together. So we can make a conscious decision to reject and resist that. And it can start with books.
I 1,000% agree with you. Lovely. This has been a great
Thank you.
We are coming up on our 30 minutes. Unfortunately, before we go, we always love to give our guests the floor, and that way you can leave. Where are my words? Any last, Jesus Christ, that was hard to say. You can leave any last remarks, as well as let the people know where they can find you.
I'd like to thank everyone. Thank you again for inviting me. Shout out to Chanel for connecting us. You can visit the website. We also have a small book nook, some little merch. You know, if subscription boxes aren't your thing, you can find us on Instagram at Reading Revolutionaries. The website is readingrevolutionaries.com. We also just launched the B.A.M book box, and that's for adults. So it's a subscription book box that includes a variation of middle grade, young adult / teen fiction, and contemporary lit that has been banned across the span of the last 80 years. And that's just our solidarity effort against this book banning, because we feel like it goes against freedom of speech, and a lot of it is intentional against marginalized authors and communities. So, yep.
Oh, well, this has been a lovely interview. We definitely appreciate you for being here, and don't let this be your last time checking
It
in.
won't.
Want to be able to watch you grow and to continue to support you as you continue to grow. What you're doing is very important in the community, and we want to stand behind that and assist you in your growth and, you know, and getting these books to these families.
Yes.
That I am going to go ahead and give you the rest of your evening back, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
You're welcome. Bye.